I will use the name Mexican enemies have given me. The whites will learn it, and you will get it. Jay Silverheels made history as the first Native American to play a Native character on TV. A character on TV he became well known as Tonto and the Lone Ranger. But there was something extremely wrong behind the scenes. In 1957, someone asked him about his. He said only 3 words when asked about his most renowned role. Words. Tonto is dumb. That wasn't the only secret. He got paid half of what his white co-star made. A director tried to hurt him bodily once on, set in the name Tonto itself meant something he could never get away from. Now, we're finding out what really occurred to the man who smiled for the camera but endured in quiet. Jay Silverheels was born Harold J. Smith on May 26, 1912, on the Grand River's Six Nations, reserve close to Hagersville, Ontario. He hailed from a big Mohawk family, one of at least 10 youngsters packed into a small home. Alexander George was his father. Edwin Smith was a hero in the Cowgirl War who won the Military Cross in World War I for being brave at the S and era. But after, the conflict left him hurt and deaf when he got home, by artillery, stranded on a farm and living on about $49 a month from the government of Canada. His medals from the war didn't provide the family food. His wounds never left. Harold saw him in pain. Every day, they had headaches and lost their hearing. Mabel, his mother, was part Mohawk and part Seneca and carried the weight of running the house. She used. Doctors employed conventional medicine because wouldn't see them. They didn't have enough money. A lot. And what little they had came from the land, commerce, or understanding of herbs. Poverty surrounded their life from the beginning. Harold was by the time he was 5, displaying symptoms of being athletic, skill, running around in local lacrosse, matches on the reserve. At 19, he was playing box lacrosse for a living for the Toronto Tumps go by the name Harry Smith. He didn't go by himself. His cousins and brothers Porky, Beef, and Chubby were right there with him on the road through Buffalo, Rochester, and the Atlantic City and beyond. They played almost nonstop during the 1930s, making money, avoiding poverty, and making a name. That name became into Silverheels, delivered to Harold after he ran past a defender so fast that it appeared like his. The shoes shone silver. It stuck. It was picked up by newspapers. People came to see it, just to watch him run. One season he scored more than 4 goals in a game, and coaches began to give 2 men simply to protect him. But becoming famous in sports didn't mean freedom from the system. Harold grew up when Canada's residential schools tried to erase Indigenous. Schools sought to get rid of Indigenous languages. Students at 6 Nations were beaten up for speaking Mohawk. Some were fed soap or tied up. Harold's own sister was sent to a residential school and came back not being able to talk to her their own tongue well. Families were made it impossible for them to stay together. Ceremonies penalized their spiritual beliefs and made them be quiet. People in charge, that they were lazy. They said they didn't have the ability to compete. That message, not only in reports, but also in how individuals saw everyday existence. Them talked to them and treated them. When the Great Depression started in the 1930s, Harold's family, like many others, went down even further. They went to Buffalo. Harold did various jobs and worked hard on farms, did what needed to be done. His father, even if he had won awards, veteran, could hardly move without discomfort. His mother traded away family heirlooms to get nourishment. The government. Food often went bad. Harold looked at. His parents gave up everything so they can keep the lights on. That kind of poor not only hurt the stomach, it made folks thought they didn't exist. Harold kept going though, his quickness on the lacrosse field opened doors. In 1932, he became a professional and played for money. Big money during the games, $75 per game. Depression. During one game in Montreal, a harsh foul started a fight, and Harold threw blows that got him kicked out. But when he got back, ticket sales tripled. People wanted to see him, even if it caused trouble. He did. Headlines. He continued on going. Then came boxing. Harold fought in the middleweight class at the Golden Gloves tournament, the Madison Square Garden. He got to the semifinals before getting hit hard in the face. That shattered his jaw in 2 places. The injury put a stop to his boxing dreams, but the award money kept him going. He lost about 25 pounds on a liquid diet, yet he didn't give up. He learned from that struggle how to endure pain and keep going. In 1937, he took his lacrosse team on a tour of Los Angeles. Group. One day, while running fast at Gilmore Stadium, where comedian Joe E. Brown saw him and gave him a tiny movie part. Harold did a stunt, a dive. Catch that took 11 tries to get right. He got $150. That was 2 times what lacrosse paid. From there, things moved. He got a Screen Actors Guild card and began calling himself Jay Silverheels. And before the end of the year, he was in 5 movies. He wasn't a star, but he was in. Hollywood did. Unroll a crimson carpet. He was a stuntman, making less than $20 a day, and cleaned tables at night to make ends meet yet. He had a regular job playing drums in 1939 along the Mohawk River. It cost $350 a week, more than he had ever made. Studios liked the name Silverheels. They told him to, said it sounded good, so use it officially. Strange. He generally played tiny parts, playing Indians without names. Casting. The directors told him to take off his shirt, like he was on exhibit. They thought about his. More than his acting, still he. Came, memorized his lines, and kept finding work. He finally got a role as a speaker. By that time, he had been in more than 15 movies, most of which he wasn't credited with, portraying the role of an Indian scout or warrior. 2. But he never stopped trying. He learned. Shakespeare because a friend stated, if you can read this, you can read. He didn't think it was for anything at first, but he learned. He worked during World War II, however records are. Then, he went back to Hollywood in 1945 with a new name, Jay Silvers. But the industry had not altered. Actors from the area were still pushed aside for white actors with makeup on. There weren't many roles, and the ones that were there were rude. He did this in 1946, tried out for the role of Captain from Castile, not eating so that his suit will fit. He had to take off his shirt since the director told him to, like always. He felt embarrassed, yet he got the role. The movie didn't do well. He had a job, but he was broke. He still stayed uncredited even after he had lines he went all over the South with. His lacrosse team, where racism was loud and unavoidable. He was turned away by hotels, places to eat, wouldn't give him food. He slept on the bus, while his white teammates got rooms. Police threatened after they got to Louisville him only for using a bathroom that said, "Only white people." These things didn't happen very often. They were always there. That's why later in life, when he finally had a chance to do it, he used it to fight for Hollywood. Better parts and more accurate portrayals. It took several years for anyone to really saw him. That changed in 1948 when director John Huston gave him a role in Key, Largo with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Beale. Jay performed the part of Tom Osceola, a important fugitive. Finally a credit, part in a big studio movie. They took pictures. Shot on the Warner Brothers back lot in Burbank for 78 days, making Florida in a controlled setting to keep costs down. Low. But for Jay, it meant getting out of there, of the dark. Not just another name missing in the credits. 2 years, Jay was cast in Broken Arrow in 1950. Arrow, a western that said it was. Moving forward yet not quite letting go of bad behaviors. He played Geronimo, a strong part but not the lead. That went to Jeff Chandler, a white actor from Brooklyn putting on black makeup to look like coochies. Even in a movie that aimed to show Native Americans in a more fair way, Hollywood couldn't bring itself to led with Native actors. People who were real Apache were engaged as extras in the background from the Fort Apache Reservation. Jay is from Canada. Mohawk accorded Geronimo respect. But everyone saw the contradiction. Then came the time that transformed his TV and life history. The year 1949 was when Silvers beat Lone Ranger to ABC, out of 35 other actors to play Tonto. It, shown on September 15th, for the first time. For the first time, a Native American played a native, a character on American TV. For the radio version of Tonto has been around for 20 years, had been said by white males like John, Todd, and Roland Parker. Even with TV, producers thought about casting a native. They thought about hiring an actress, but they didn't. One person was fired for not wanting to talk in bad English. They went back to John Todd before, giving Jay the job at last. At that time, it was common for Hollywood to paint Italian actors with Armenia bull red, clay to make them look like they belong. Jay's casting broke that mold. He wasn't. He was intended to win the part, but he did. And it made everything different. There was always a difficulty with the name. So much. Means fool or stupid in Spanish. Silver. Hills knew it. He dealt with it. He smiled in public. He privately resented it. In 1957, when I went to someone at his home reserve in Ontario, asked him about the famous part he played. The response came quickly.
Tonto was dumb. That. He only said 3 words. But. There was 10 years of silence behind those words. Anger. The name stuck for decades, even as Native American tribes pointed out how rude it was when, in 2013, Johnny Depp played Tonto. The controversy came back. Nothing had changed. And it wasn't simply the name. People said that Jay never read his lines, not because he was lazy, but since the lines were typically poor and stiff, written in poor English to sound real. So he'd make it up as he went along. He would do it. Up. Wait here for me. You head to town. That. Okay. The phrase is stuck. Directors were angry. Alan Dinhart remembers how one director, Wilhelm Tila, turned red with anger and had to be held down, back from attacking Jay on set in 1955. But Clayton Moore was the Lone Ranger. Himself defended his co-star. Let it. He'd say, play. It sounds more as it should. Jay was right. He knew how people truly talked, but Hollywood didn't want that. They sought a stereotype, and he was made to give it. Behind me, things weren't any better behind the scenes. The budget for each episode was just $12,500, so they cut corners. Jay and Moore didn't even have real dressing rooms. At first, they needed a change. Clothing in a bathroom at a petrol station down the road. The heat at the site was really bad, notably in Chatsworth, where the garments made of suede and wool became ovens. Jay had had enough. One day he wouldn't get dressed and just stood there, waiting. Moore told him that putting it off would. The shoot could cost employment, but Jay wouldn't move. The next day, private. There were dressing rooms. It was a little win, but it meant something. Jay could have just accepted becoming famous. He was now a star. The Lone Ranger was one of the best TV programs. It came in 7th place in Nielsen ratings for 551 season and stayed in the top 34 for years. They made 221 over the course of 8 episodes. But Jay never forgot how much it cost. He didn't like how Tonto had turned out. He didn't like being the sidekick who always talked in fragmented phrases. He was crisp, clear, and fluid. But the show didn't let him be that. Then came a fear that made the show halt. In 1955, during a fight scene practice, a stuntman fell on Jay. Moore saw there was something wrong. Jay was on his way. In a strange way, he went after him to the trailer and saw him holding his chest. Heart attack. Even though it was a Golden Gloves boxer, an athlete, and a lacrosse champion, Jay was a heavy smoker and a boxer. He missed 8 weeks of recovery time. At that time, a new character named Dan Reed was brought in to fill the void. Authors said that Tonto wasn't there because he was in Washington to meet the great white dad. That line meant more than they knew. Jay was at home. Harold Smith, he married Mary Doma in 1945, and they had 4 kids together. Jay, Marilyn, Pamela, Karen, and Junior from his first marriage to Bobby Smith. He had 2 more, Steve and Gail. He made a joke about their blended backgrounds. He once revealed on The Tonight Show that he married an Italian to get back at Chris Columbus and called their kids Indolence. But the joke has a deeper meaning. Jay's. My grandfather was a chief of the Mohawk tribe. He was raised on the Six Nations Reserve in Ontario. The Indian version of Hollywood was far from the truth he held. With him, Jay Silverheels took on the part of Tonto, a Kiowa chief in the movie War Arrow. It wasn't a lead part, but it put him next to major names like Maureen O'Hara and Jeff. Maureen O'Hara and Jeff are 2 names that come to mind. Chandler. Filming went on from early. Filmed in Arizona from March to April. In places like Sanitas and Nogales. Empire Ranch. along with a few other scenes in Agoura in California. What began as a solid action western turned out to be cut down by director George Sherman, who cut out a few action scenes and put in talkie sequences instead that clarified what was going on instead of showing it. The studio even said this choice made the movie worse afterward. It still has great stunt scenes and beautiful Technicolor images. Marino O'Hara would subsequently report that Chandler was pleasant, but didn't think he was a good actor. Silverheels' character was on the other side of the main battle, reminder of how native roles used to be, usually put just outside of the attention, but still there. The next year, he performed another supporting role in 1954, in Drums Across the River. This time he portrayed TA in a western directed by Nathan Jaron, directed it, and Audie Murphy played the lead role. Some of it was filmed in Technicolor. The most beautiful places in California, Barton Flats and Red Rock are two of them. Canyon. Murphy played a young man who was striving to stop a conflict with the Ute tribe while being accused of a crime he didn't do. Silverhill had more than one role. Background. His character stood for the Aboriginal voice in a story about land, fights, and escalating tensions. The movie contained dramatic scenes with horses fighting, and what one critic dubbed a jump of, a death stunt that stood out. These types of physical scenes came naturally too. Once, Silverheels was a boxer and a lacrosse player. Morris Ankrum joined him on screen as Chief Array in a $1 million production, a lot of money for the period. After the Lone Ranger series ended in 1956 and ended airing in 1957, Silverheels came back as Tonto in two films. The Lone Ranger came first in. The Lone Ranger and the Lost came out in 1956. In 1958, City Gold, the second movie, was 81 minutes long and filmed in Eastman. Colored by United Artists, he did. With Clayton Moore, again, the movie did well. Not a hit, but not a failure. What hit hard was what happened next. After, because of the role of Tonto, he had made him famous, but it also limited him. From then on, much of what he got presented were identical local roles a lot of the time, narrow and based on stereotypes. It was the kind casting that slowly made his choices. He kept turning up in the 1960s, in westerns and as a guest on TV shows. Wagon, Wanted, Dead or Alive, Rawhide, Train, LaRam, Daniel Boone, The Virginia, but virtually always the same kind of character. Even when he gave good, he rarely got the recognition he deserved for his performances, not getting the praise or variety he deserved. He was on Daniel Boone 3 times from 1964 to 1965. He played parts that didn't even come close to, gave him any lines. While they were making V, he made roughly $100,000 from Lone Ranger for each season, which would be about $850,000 today, although that was still only half of what Clayton Moore was making. That pay gap followed him for much of his job as the 1960s went on, so the struggle for native rights did. And with it got criticism, but not from Hollywood, but from those who live in native communities. Activists began to speak out against how native characters like Tonto made old stereotypes. One scholar referred to Tonto as Ann. Indians step in, fetch it while Russell means the chief of the Native American. The movement used Tonto as an insult, like way Uncle Tom was used in black communities. Silverheels found himself stuck between the prominence he had acquired and the picture that made him famous. He began to fade off the screen, not because he wanted to, but because networks and studios got worried about backlash. Even if he had been successful in the past, keep him safe from the shifting weather. But instead of going away or fading away, he turned towards something more while being quiet, lasting. He did this in the early 1960s,
co-founded the Indian Actors Workshop in L.A. It started at the L.A. Indian Center with help from Buffy St. Marie, Rod Redwing, and Iron Eyes Cody. By 1966, it had become a real part of the scene, giving native speakers and holding sessions once a week, a place for performers to practice, train, and improve their skills. One of them, Michael Horse, was one of the future actors who later played Tonto in The Legend of the Lone Ranger in 1981 and became famous for his part in Twin Peaks. Silver, in 1973, indicated that their major purpose was to open the creativity that is sleeping inside native groups of people. He didn't simply say it, he made it. In the late 1930s, acting as a background actor and stuntman. Jay Silverheels is an actor in Hollywood, married Bobby Smith. Their marriage broke up. By 1943, around the same period, he was doing unsteady film work, and he served in the military during World War II, was often gone doing unsafe things. Stunts for movies like The Seahawk and Western Union, making just enough to $50 to $75 a week is all you need to survive on. His divorce made him distant from his Steve and a daughter are the two children. Name changes in records, sometimes listed as Sharon and sometimes Gail. Jay's little pay, constant travel, and the legal problems that come with serving in the military during wartime made it almost impossible for him to stay in touch with them often. In 1945 or 1946, a few years later, Jay married Mary Doma, an Italian-American woman he once made fun of, considering getting married only to get back at Columbus Christopher. He called there, Indelians are kids. They had 4 kids, Jay Jr., Marilyn Pamela, and Karen, and settled down in Canoga Park, California. Jay got the part that would in 1949 define his public image, Tonto in the Lone Ranger. It made him famous, but not luck. Back then, contracts didn't give a lot of long-term pay, and being so deeply typecast meant that Tonto was both a big step forward and a trap. Even after the show stopped in 1957, he was always put in jobs that looked and talked like Tonto. He had a heart attack during filming in 1955, and missed 8 weeks of work, which was not boost his money, which were already tight. Even so, he and Mary stayed together. Till he died, he had to deal with all the ups and downs of a long and unstable career, and the ups and downs of a lengthy and precarious job. He started to think in the early 1960s, describes how Native Americans were depicted in Hollywood and beyond. Somebody got to speak for them, which is the most important thing. He began to covertly support a project that would become official in 1966, the Indian Actors Workshop. It was his way of doing something real instead of protesting from the outside. He thought boycotts wouldn't work for Native Americans as they had for African Americans, suggesting that Indians would not boycott, indicate that a black person would lose money, potentially trigger a boycott. So he paid attention to what he could control, training. With Noble Kid Chisel and William, Jay taught Bassett acting, voice and stunts, work, and even food to people who want to. Native actors. They had meetings once a week at venues like the Indian Center in Los Angeles, Center in a church, an echo that is part of the Methodist Church. Park. The purpose was clear, to help Native people who want to be actors join the Screen Actors Guild, to get better parts and slowly change how studios looked at them. Not everyone liked this way of doing things. People who fight for change. Russell Means saw Tonto as a symbol of everything that is wrong with Native representation. People made fun of the character as an Indian step and fetch it, and the word Tonto even became a slur among activists. But Jay kept to his path. He thought that meaningful transformation would, not from yelling at the gates, but from getting folks through them. He even started a letter writing campaign to President Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon and the heads of major TV networks to push better representations of Native Americans on screen. The workshop also dealt with challenges that affect the whole community, like alcohol, abuse, and taking care of the elderly. It wasn't just about acting, it was about individuality, pride, and staying alive. As the 1970s began, Jay took on a second career in harness racing. He got a temporary driver's license in 1974 and taught horses how to do things in Hollywood Park. He liked running them around the track, and his celebrity helped get people to come to races when he went on tour in the East in 1973, and in 1973, One of the ponies he subsequently honored, sporting Hijo Silverheels, shattered a track record at Los Alamitos in 1996. Mary, Jay's widow, and Jay Jr., his son, were to see it happen. But by that time, Jay had been gone for a long time. Just like in 1975, more serious and respectful responsibilities were. He finally got what he wanted, but he had to go through a series of strokes that left him somewhat unable to move. In 1976, another significant stroke had a big impact on his speech. Just on July 17, 1979, he got his months before he died. Hollywood Walk of Fame star. He came in a wheelchair with native dancers. He could hardly stammer a few words of thanks. It was a calm, a bittersweet moment for a man who has said so much with his actions. Jay died on March 5, 1980, at the age of 67. Problems from that stroke and pneumonia at a Calabasas hospital. He was burned and his ashes were given back to the Six Nations Reserve in Ontario, where he was born. His son Jay Silverheels Jr. took care of the family mantle, and when after acting, he looked. In the movie The Legend of the Lone Ranger, a movie from 1981 that had so many problems with production that made it a warning story in Hollywood, the lead, the whole voice of the actor has to be dubbed. Clayton Moore, the first actor to play the Lone Ranger, was not allowed to wear the character's mask in public, which made Storm in the media. The movie did so horribly that its main actor never acted again. Still, Jay Jr. kept working in TV, striving to walk the same path his father had taken, being proud, being seen, and pushing for more and better parts for homegrown performers. Back when Jay officially started in 1966, he remarked that the Indian Actors Workshop was his. The major goal was to go to the dormant, the Indians' inventiveness. That creativity didn't remain quiet for long. After he died, the years that followed, the workshop had an effect on the development of native actors like Graham Greene, who was nominated for an Oscar for Dances with Wolves and movies like Smoke. Signals in 1998, the first thing, written, directed, and made by Indigenous Americans. The concrete has Jay's name on it, of Hollywood and the history of Native movies. He was inducted into, after he died, the Hall of Fame for Western Performers in. The Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame opened in 1993. Fame in 1997, with the name Harry Tanto Smith. The portrait is still on display at Shays in Buffalo, Center for the Performing Arts. His power is there in every Native storyteller who wants more than just cliches and decides to talk, act, and write about their own rules. And even though he used to, remarked that every time he had to do it, he felt sick within. To say Tanto's words in bad English, he never allowed anger get in the way. He came out on The Tonight Show in 1969. Tanto glanced right at the camera and said, "I'm Tanto. I come from. I speak Esperanto and live in Toronto." Jay said that the lines weren't his own. Silverheels knows how to get back to stage.